Today I want to talk about desire. Desire is often denigrated in spiritual systems, especially in systems that are essentially ascetic in character. Now, just to be clear, what do I mean by ascetic? Asceticism, in its essence, is a process of limiting or shutting off sensory experience. So the quintessential ascetic practice would be, for instance, silent meditation, where you sit in a quiet place and sit very still with the body and mind calm and engaged in an inner process that ideally shuts out all external stimuli and therefore all external distractions. So there are other kinds of ascetic practices. Of course, celibacy is a common one, fasting, among especially medieval Catholic saints who got mortification of the flesh, wearing uncomfortable clothing, allowing vermin to crawl on you, etc., etc. All right. Those are different shades of asceticism, some of them relatively minor and even helpful, and others questionable in terms of their spiritual utility. In any case, in systems that are ascetic in character, desire, specifically for desire for experience of sensory nature, in other words, a desire of worldly kinds of experiences, is denigrated, is discouraged. And it's not uncommon in such systems to have prescriptions about what you should or should not want. And so people will sometimes bend themselves into pretzels, very uncomfortable psychological conditions, in order to try to want or not want what they should or should not. And from a tantric perspective, all of this is quite unnecessary and mostly counterproductive, and often leads to neurosis, paralysis, psychological paralysis, where you inwardly want something, but you're telling yourself you shouldn't want it, and so you're frozen, as it were, between these two irreconcilable positions. Tantra takes a more psychologically sophisticated view of desire. It's not that unfettered desire is lauded in Tantra. It's not a hedonistic system in that sense. If it feels good, do it kind of thing. No, that's not Tantra. Although there are some who practice those things in the name of Tantra and give Tantra a bad name. Or a good name, depending if that's what you're looking for. Nevertheless, traditional Tantra isn't about that at all. It's about seeking enlightenment, but using our psychophysical organism in organic ways that naturally lead us toward the spiritual goal, rather than artificially forcing us into ways that contradict our essential nature. So one of the principles that I often talk about and have written about is that desire is your place of power. Now, what do I mean by that? Desire is your place of power. Well, if you can say with full confidence and full commitment, I want whatever, then all of your energies can get marshaled to focus on how to achieve what it is you want. Now, if you don't want anything, then never mind. But Most of us, desire is what gets us up in the morning. If we had no desire, then there would be no motivation to do anything. And much of what gives our lives meaning and fulfillment are the things that we accomplish or do in the world and the experiences that we garner. And Tantra says that's all to the good. It's good to have those experiences, even necessary spiritually, to fulfill legitimate desires. Now, what do I mean by legitimate desires? I mean desires that don't harm other people or yourself intentionally. Sometimes people get harmed unintentionally. That's just part of being human, and it's unfortunate, but it happens. But I'm talking about selfish, harmful desires as being not legitimate. Those aren't the things that Tantra is talking about. We're talking about things that people want to experience. Relationships, material security, a sense of purpose, of groundedness. In Sanskrit, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Okay, dharma is that sense of groundedness and connectedness. Artha, material security. Kama, desires. And moksha, liberation. So that we want to have those experiences, but we don't want to be bound by them. And that's where the problem of the senses come in, because the senses are what lead us toward the fulfillment of desires. That's all fine. It's all very natural. But those same senses can drag us toward experiences that keep us bound to a certain psychophysical identity that prevents us from experiencing the totality of who we really are, this infinite consciousness that we say is the essence of the world, of the essence of reality. So, what to do about desire? First of all, from a tantric perspective, we honor desire, okay? But our philosophy says what the whole world is really made of consciousness. This divine being, mythologically speaking, has become all that we see and experience in the world. So whenever we think we want a thing or a person, what we really want is that divine essence, because that is the only lasting, real thing that's there within any desired object. So keeping that in mind, that yeah, I'm attracted toward that person, or I'd really like to have that nice Apple Watch or whatever, that it's not the thing in itself or the person in him or herself that is drawing us. It is that desire for that connection, that experience of the deeper spiritual essence, the consciousness that is the substratum of all those experiences, all those things. So that's a key difference, is there's a mindful awareness of the spiritual goal, the spiritual essence that we're seeking. Now, there's a metaphor I like to use. Think of the sun as kind of the spiritual goal, as the divine self, big S. And the sun can be reflected in a mirror that we hold in our hand. Now, the sun in the mirror isn't the sun in the sky, right? But it's a close approximation. It gives us a sense of where that real sun actually is, and it gives us a sense of the brilliance and the heat of the sun held right in our hand. Now, imagine that mirror shattered in thousands of pieces, and they're all glittering with little suns in them all and around us. So that's the condition in which we're born in the world, with our minds scattered into thousands of pieces, and the real thing, the sun, reflected in those pieces. And we see them as if they're external to us, and we go out and pick up these little shiny pieces of shards of this shattered mirror, and we find, first of all, the actual sun isn't there, and secondly, we often cut ourselves on the sharp edges. And so, not deterred, we still go to other shards and keep picking up pieces, and so on. So in the Tantric method, what we want to do is to regather the shattered mirror. In this case, it means collecting our attention and our intention so that the sun is once again reflected in the single mirror of our minds, so that we can then shift our attention and ultimately our identity from this reflected sun to the actual sun and experience ourselves as the light of consciousness that we actually are. So to summarize, when you feel yourself drawn to any person or anything, that handsome or beautiful person, that desirable object, realize that it's not the person or the object itself that draws you, that attracts you. It is the divine essence, that light of the sun within that person or object, that is the real object of desire, the ultimate object of desire. And while you're having whatever experience you're having in the process of fulfilling those desires, don't hide from any aspect of it, pleasurable or unpleasurable. Accept the pleasure as it is, enjoy it. And when there is pain, acknowledge that this experience also contains pain. And through this process of focusing on the divine essence in the midst of desire and taking in the lessons of each experience, it will eventually lessen the grip of the senses, the binding power of desire, and enable us to experience the freedom of infinite consciousness that we are.